The African-American painter, printmaker, and teacher Charles Wilbert White was born on April 2, 1918 in Chicago. He attended the Art Institute of Chicago and the Art Students League in New York City. He is notably known for his art pieces concerning African-American discrimination. White's work is included in the permanent collections of LACMA, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Whitney Museum, Newark Museum, and the Santa Barbara Museum of Art. The artist executed several murals in various cities throughout the United States, many under the sponsorship of the WPA. In 1940, the Associated Negro Press commissioned a mural for the Chicago Public Library. He completed another at the Hampton Institute of Virginia in 1943, and, late in his career, at the Mary McLeod Bethune Library in Los Angeles. Charles White was inspired by the Harlem Renaissance and the Black Arts Movement, which were significant developments for the 20th century American art history. The fact that Harlem flourished as a cultural center for African American arts is of consequence. These movements developed in part as a result of disparity and racial discrimination. This rebirth for African Americans was revolutionary for the social group, since it provided an outlet for the blacks to create art, poetry, and literature. This movement challenged the ongoing racism and stereotypes made against African Americans. Many notable artworks were made during this time, which eventually provided motivation for the civil rights movement in the 1960s. It was during this time that Charles White started to create pieces that his voice broke through to the public. White incorporates strong African American figures that seem to be dealing with the social injustice happening in the country at the time. As the viewer can see by all his art pieces, White utilized themes to reveal his passions and encourage the audience to realize the present issues of the politics, identity, and history. Some themes prominently used were the fight for freedom, the loyalty and nobility of African Americans, and the honor of labor. White claims that art must be an integral part of the struggle. It can't simply mirror what's taking place. It must adapt itself to human needs. It must ally itself with the forces of liberation. The fact is, artists have always been propagandists. I have no use for artists who try to divorce themselves from the struggle. Depicting this quote, White is putting forth that it is very important for people to be a part of the political scene and to take actions toward it. Without doing so, no further measures will take place in order to achieve the social justice African Americans are searching for. As an author named Brown claims, in the artist's literary and visual expressions, the artwork functions to define an African American cultural identity, to reclaim a certain femaleness within that identity, and ultimately to affirm the black woman's role in human and cultural continuity. This is exactly what is shown in White's 1945 lithograph, Hope for the Future. It shows a mother holding her child in front of the window. The landscape seems to be opening into a bare land. As you look even closer, the viewer can see that there is a noose hanging from the barren tree in the background. This is just visible over the mother's right shoulder. With this image, White condemns the violence facing African Americans and the inhumane lynchings happening to those people. White supremacy reigned high during this period of time, with the civil rights movement butting heads with the KKK. This art piece forces the viewer to confront it and wonder about the newborn's unknown fate. There is also a lack of any color, mostly ranging from just light and dark grays. This help alludes to the melancholic situation that White was trying to point across. In his much later work, Black Pope, or otherwise known as Sandwich Board Man from 1973, the central figure is a man wearing sunglasses who seems like he's a street preacher. The entire painting is in brown oil wash that became White's signature medium. This painting demands the viewer's attention with a sandwich board reading, "Now." The preacher is bundled up in a bulky coat and scarf while his sunglasses cover his eyes. His raised left hand forms a peace sign that mimics how there is no peace. Stenciled text at the top of the composition reads, "Chicago, which is where he was born." There is a haunting skeleton hovering above the preacher, and shapes and shadows filling the background all hint at further meaning without providing clear answers. There's a big cross on his forehead that indicates that he is a preacher or a pope in some pattern. However, his unusual beard and sunglasses leaves the audience pondering about who this man actually is. Clearly, it can be seen that White was active to show the discrimination against African Americans. His different styles of art all came together to deliver a single message: freedom and justice for all African Americans. In all, he powerfully interpreted and incorporated African culture and history over the span of his career.